In the quiet villages of 19th century America, some children were ordinary. Others were anything but. Nathaniel Crow arrived in Brimfield, Massachusetts, in 1871. A boy whose gaze recorded more than it should, whose presence coincided with unexplained events that puzzled an entire community. Today, we uncover the meticulously documented life of a child whose intellect and detachment left a mark historians couldn't ignore. Welcome to Forgotten Chronicles, where history hides its darkest secrets. On the morning of March 12, 1871, at precisely 09:15 local time, Elias Whitmore, a 9-year-old male, arrived in the village of Brimfield, Massachusetts. Subject measured approximately 1.35 meters in height, of thin build, with amber-colored irises and dark brown hair combed to the right. Attire consisted of a woolen jacket with 4 brass buttons, knee-length trousers, a white linen shirt, and leather boots with laces secured. The subject carried a single leather satchel, approximately 35 centimeters in length, containing personal garments and 1 cloth-bound book. Subject's arrival occurred via the 0852 train from Worcester, Massachusetts, arriving on track 2 of Brimfield Station. Station records indicate the train carried 47 passengers and 2 baggage cars. Upon disembarkation, subject remained stationary for 32 seconds, facing the station building, before approaching the assigned guardian, Reverend Elias Whitcomb, age 42, height 1.78 meters, with dark hair, a trimmed beard, and black clerical attire. Subject and guardian exchanged formal salutations. Subject inclined the head, extended right hand once, and received a single clasp from guardian. Total verbal communication measured 27 words. The route from station to Whitmore homestead measured approximately 1.2 kilometers. Subject traversed Brimfield Street, passing 6 residential structures, 3 single-story clapboard homes, 2 brick townhouses, and 1 commercial storefront. All residences had front porches. 2 displayed visible house numbers, 14 and 18. Weather conditions recorded at 09:30 were overcast, temperature 2 degrees C, wind speed 12 km/h from the northeast. Road surface consisted of compacted dirt with intermittent gravel, no significant obstructions noted. Subject maintained steady pace of 1.1 meters per second, hands held alongside torso, gaze directed alternately toward ground and nearest straw. Tours. At 09:45, subject paused adjacent to a public water pump for 27 seconds. Observers noted slight elevation of chin and left hand adjusting satchel strap. No verbal communication occurred. Upon resuming movement, subject maintained distance of 1.2 meters behind guardian, altering pace only when prompted by guardian to turn at street intersection. At 09:58, subject reached Whitmore Homestead, a 2-story clapboard residence located at 23 Brimfield Street. The homestead comprised a main structure, detached carriage house, and vegetable garden to the rear. Subject ascended 4 steps of wooden front porch, pausing at threshold for 15 seconds, hands clasped before torso. Inside the homestead, subject was formally introduced to Samuel Whitmore, age 46, uncle and legal guardian. Interaction recorded as 3 verbal exchanges: introduction, acknowledgement of subject's arrival, and instruction to remove outer garments. Subject complied without hesitation. Observers documented removal of jacket and boots. Garments were placed sequentially on coat hooks. No unsolicited movement outside instruction observed. Subject's first meal occurred at 10:25 in the main dining room. Table measured 1.5 meters by 0.9 meters. Seats arranged for 4 occupants: Samuel Whitmore, Reverend Whitcomb, housekeeper Mrs. Agnes Fielding, age 52, and subject. Meal comprised porridge, boiled eggs, and tea. Subject consumed 80% of allocated porridge, 100% of boiled egg, and no tea. Utensil use executed correctly. Left hand remained stationary on table edge. During meal, subject engaged in 2 verbal exchanges totaling 12 words: acknowledgement of food, and answer to guardian inquiry regarding train journey. No unsolicited conversation recorded. Following meal, Subject conducted first survey of immediate homestead environment. Movement traced via compass bearings and measured distances, 6.2 meters north to study room, 4.5 meters east to stairwell, 3.8 meters west to pantry. Subject examined each area for 67 seconds, 82 seconds, and 45 seconds respectively, adjusting clothing minimally, occasionally repositioning satchel strap. Observers noted frequent gaze toward corners and windows, no contact with objects except brief resting of hand on windowsill. At 11:40, subject was escorted to the rear garden. Garden dimensions: 12 meters by 8 meters. Soil tilled, no active plantings. Subject walked perimeter, approximately 48 meters total, pausing twice for 23 and 19 seconds. During observation, subject noted but did not touch garden gate, a wooden structure 1.6 meters high. 2 crows observed within 20 meters radius. Subject's head orientation recorded toward crows for 11 seconds. No vocalization. First interaction with villagers occurred at 12:05 when subject accompanied guardian to Brimfield market. Subject observed market stalls, vendor count 7, commodity distribution, 3 vegetable, 2 dry goods, 2 textiles. Observer notation: subject maintained distance 0.8 to 1.5 meters from each vendor, head orientation consistently scanning stall items. Subject asked 2 questions totaling 10 words. Responses received from vendors totaling 14 words. No deviation from instructed path recorded. Subject's behavior noted for consistency in gait, posture, and manual activity. Step length averaged 0.53 meters. Cadence 102 steps per minute. Hands remained clasped or alongside torso, except during brief adjustments to satchel strap. Duration 2 to 3 seconds per adjustment. No observable fidgeting or vocalization outside formal interactions. In the late afternoon, subject was reintroduced to homestead interior for study of library room, 3.2 meters by 4.5 meters, approximately 126 volumes arranged on 4 shelves. Subject opened 4 books, examined textual content for cumulative duration of 48 minutes, handled pages minimally. Observers recorded hand positioning, page-turning cadence, and occasional glances toward windows. No marking, annotation, or removal of items noted. Observers documented evening meal at 17:20. Subject replicated morning compliance, seating, utensils, verbal exchanges, 7 words total, and food consumption, 82% porridge, 100% protein portion, 0% tea. Subsequent to meal, subject ascended stairwell to assigned bedroom, 3.0 meters by 3.8 meters, containing bed, desk, chair, and wardrobe. Subject arranged satchel beside bed, opened wardrobe for 2 minutes, placing outer garments systematically. Observers recorded all movements, including posture, gaze direction, and minor hand adjustments. At 19:15, subject engaged in initial nocturnal observation of external environment. Windows oriented north and west. Visibility extended to village square, approximate distance 120 meters. Subject spent cumulative 27 minutes viewing surroundings, alternating standing and seated positions. Observers noted head rotation approximately every 10 to 15 seconds, minimal facial movement, and repeated adjustment of hands clasped before torso. Subject retired at 20:03. Lights extinguished at 20:05 per household schedule. Bed made, according to standard procedure. Subject lying supine, limbs aligned with mattress orientation. No further activity observed until 06:10 following morning, indicating uninterrupted rest. Throughout the documented period, multiple observers recorded interactions, environmental conditions, and subject behavior without interpretation of intent. Notable observations include consistent attentiveness to surroundings, measured and precise physical movements, and absence of unsolicited speech or emotional display. Minor irregularities noted include prolonged observation of peripheral objects and repeated adjustment of satchel strap during stationary intervals. No behavior deviated from chronological sequence or compliance with guardian instruction. Record of day concludes at 20:15 on March 12, 1871. Subject's presence logged in village registry, household ledger, and market vendor interactions. Observations indicate baseline behavioral data for subsequent monitoring and comparison with later events. Archival notes preserved, referencing precise times, distances, interactions, and environmental conditions to maintain chronological accuracy and procedural fidelity. On March 25, 1871 at 07:20, villagers of Brimfield reported the first unusual occurrence in proximity to the Whitmore homestead. 3 chickens maintained within a fenced enclosure measuring 12 meters by 8 meters were discovered deceased. Observers from household ledger records identified no visible signs of trauma, wounds, or predation. Environmental conditions at the time: overcast sky, temperature 1 degrees, wind northeast at 14 km/h, ground damp from overnight precipitation, 0.8 centimeters recorded. Subject Nathaniel Crow, age 9, was observed seated on the front steps of the homestead at 07:18, hands resting on knees, gaze directed toward the poultry enclosure. No verbal communication was recorded at the time. Household ledger notes indicate the chickens were last observed at 1840 on March 24th, active and feeding. Enclosure measured with wooden slats, 1.2 meters high, no breach detected. Subsequent inspection by housekeeper Mrs. Agnes Fielding, age 52, confirmed absence of footprints or external disturbance beyond subject's own tracks near porch steps. Total observation duration, 22 minutes. At 09:05, Nathaniel Crow entered the kitchen area, standing near pantry shelves for 3 minutes. Records indicate placement of hands on 3 jars, rotation of each jar to examine labels, and return to shelf without removal. At 09:08, subject exited kitchen to rear garden, traversing 6.8 meters in 9 seconds, passing by garden gate. Observers noted head rotation toward deceased chickens from distance of 4 meters. Subject did not touch carcasses. March 26, 1871, 06:45. Further anomalies reported in livestock behavior. 2 goats, located within 10 meters north of homestead, were found unresponsive. Veterinary inspection logged by Dr. Jonathan Pierce, visiting physician, identified no overt physical injury or disease markers. Environmental measurements: temperature 1 degree C, overcast, wind 16 km/h northeast, soil firm from prior frost. Subject observed approaching goat enclosure at 06:41, hands folded behind back, pace 1.2 meters per second, stopping 1.5 meters from each goat for 42 and 37 seconds respectively. Dr. Pierce recorded both durations using pocket chronometer. Subsequent household events noted minor domestic accidents of unusual regularity. On March 27, 1871, at 08:30, a cast-iron kettle placed on kitchen hearth 1.2 meters above floor level was found fractured along lateral seam. Measurement of kettle fragments: 14 cm, 9 cm, 7 cm. Nathaniel observed near hearth at 08:27, standing at distance 1.4 meters for 2 minutes, then leaving to front porch. No recorded contact with kettle during interval. Housekeeper recorded incident in domestic ledger. No additional physical explanation noted. March 28, 1871, 11:10. Third instance of livestock anomaly. A single hen found deceased beneath rear apple tree, no visible trauma. Tree height 4.2 meters, canopy radius 1.5 meters, ground moist from light rainfall, 0.5 centimeters. Nathaniel recorded as moving from study room to rear garden at 11:07. Distance 7 meters in 8 seconds, stopping adjacent to apple tree for 31 seconds. Observer log indicates repeated head rotation toward hen, hands held clasped in front. By March 29, 1871, local council received reports of anomalies within Whitmore property. Documented at 10:30 in council minutes. Observations of repeated domestic and agricultural irregularities. Ongoing verification advised. Official notation requested maintenance of chronological record of incidents. Nathaniel Crow noted as primary resident on property. March 30th, 1871, so 7:15. Additional household anomaly recorded. Milk pail, 15-litre capacity, placed on pantry floor, found overturned. Spillage measured 3.7 litres. Subject located 2.2 metres away at 07:12, standing stationary for 3 minutes, occasionally shifting weight between feet. Observers recorded no physical contact with pail. March 31st, 1871, 06:55. Dr. Pierce initiated systematic documentation of Nathaniel's activities, noting temporal correlation between subject presence and anomalies. Methodology included timed observation of subject, recording precise distances to objects, duration of stationary intervals, and cataloguing sequential occurrences within 20-metre radius of homestead. April 2nd, 1871, 09:40. Environmental event of note. A rainstorm produced localized flooding in low-lying garden area, 0.15 meters accumulation. Subject observed at 09:37, traversing 8 meters from kitchen door to garden perimeter, halting 2.5 meters from low-lying area for 45 seconds. Observer notes specify gaze directed toward water accumulation, no interaction with surface recorded. Subsequent drainage patterns documented, no equipment interference noted. April 4th, 1871, 10:05. Record of poultry behavior. Remaining 5 chickens exhibited irregular feeding patterns described in household ledger, periods of immobility, rapid pecking, and avoidance of designated feed area. Subject observed entering enclosure at 10:02, pacing 1.1 meters per second along enclosure perimeter, stopping at 4 points for cumulative 2 minutes, hands held before torso. No interaction with feed or livestock documented. April 5th, 1871, 08:30. Second domestic accident. Kitchen broom, height 1.5 meters, noted on floor of utility closet, handle fractured at midpoint, approx 0.75 meters from base. Subject observed near closet from 08:27 to 08:29, standing 1.3 meters away, shifting gaze from floor to broom. No pH. Icicle contact detected. April 6, 1871, 07:20, livestock anomaly. 2 goats positioned near northern fence, previously active, found lying prone, no injury observed. Nathaniel recorded moving along northern path 07:17 to 07:19, total distance 12 meters, stopping 3.5 meters from goats. Duration of observation 45 seconds. Dr. Pierce annotated incident with environmental conditions. Temperature 2 degrees, overcast, soil firm, wind northeast, 10 kilometers. April 7th, 1871, 0900. Dr. Pierce conducted initial survey of homestead inventory and livestock records. Observed cumulative anomalies: 3 chickens deceased, 2 goats prone, 2 domestic items fractured. Survey included measurements of distances between subject, objects, and animal locations. Notation concluded with instruction to continue daily observation, maintain detailed chronological record, and include weather, soil, and wind data. April 8th, 1871, 11:15. Environmental irregularity. Small fire observed in rear garden compost heap, 0.9 meters diameter. Extinguished by household staff. Subject located 5 meters away from heap for 2 minutes, observing compost without physical interaction. Temperature 6 degrees, overcast, wind 12 km to northeast. April 10, 1871, 07:05. Cumulative anomaly recorded. Livestock count verified. 5 chickens, 2 goats. Of initial stock, 3 chickens deceased. 2 goats prone on previous occasions. All remaining livestock active, but exhibiting intermittent immobility. Duration 3 to 7 seconds per observation point. Subject monitored near animal enclosures for total of 18 minutes over multiple intervals. April 12, 1871, 0840. Dr. Pierce added notation to household ledger. Subject demonstrates consistent proximity to locations where anomalies occur. Further empirical data collection required. No inference of causality recorded. April 13, 1871, 0950. Minor structural incident. Kitchen cupboard door, Height 1.8 meters, found ajar. Latch disengaged. Subject observed within 2.1 meters prior to discovery, standing stationary for 2 minutes. Environmental conditions: temperature 5 degrees Celsius, wind 8 km northeast, overcast. April 15, 1871, 0735. Additional livestock anomaly. Chicken enclosure measured 12 meters by 8 meters. One chicken observed prone, immobile for 4 minutes before standing. Subject present 3 meters from enclosure, stationary, 1 minute. Observation logged without interpretation. April 16, 1871, 10:10. Sequence of minor household events recorded. 2 utensils displaced from designated storage, broom handle found again on floor. Subject monitored from 10:05 to 10:09, standing 1.5 meters from kitchen area. April 18, 1871, 0820. Environmental observation. Partial collapse of small stone boundary wall. Length 1.2 meters, height 0.8 meters. Subject located 2.8 meters from wall, standing stationary for 3 minutes. Weather: overcast, wind northeast 14 km/h. Soil damp. No additional disturbance noted. April 20th, 1871, 0905. Dr. Pierce, summary notation. Total recorded incidents between March 25th and April 20th, 12 livestock anomalies, 6 domestic accidents, 3 environmental irregularities. OBS. Ovational logs of subject indicate consistent presence in proximity to events. All movements, gestures, and stationary durations recorded without inference. Ledger entries concluded with notation. Further systematic observation required. Data collection ongoing. From the moment of Nathaniel Crow's arrival in Brimfield, his actions exhibited a consistent pattern of meticulous attention to his environment. Observers noted that he carried a small notebook and pencil, which he used to record measurements, sketches, and sequential accounts of events surrounding the Whitmore homestead and adjacent village areas. He moved through streets, gardens, and enclosures with precise steps, pausing at regular intervals to note the location of objects, structural features, and living creatures. His sketches mapped positions of domestic items, livestock, and pathways, frequently annotated with distances, angles, and orientation relative to established reference points such as gates, fences, or hearths. Environmental conditions: temperature, wind direction, soil moisture, and precipitation were consistently recorded alongside spatial observations, producing a cross-reference set of data that reflected both human and non-human activity within a single contiguous framework. Livestock behavior occupied a significant portion of Nathaniel's observations. Chickens, goats, and other animals were noted for posture, locomotion, feeding patterns, and intervals of immobility. Movements were mapped and measured. Repeated patterns were identified without commentary on causation or intention. Even minor shifts in object positions, kitchen implements, furniture, or enclosures, were logged with metric precision, and sketches documented both previous and current positions to establish continuity. These notations were accompanied by time-stamped entries and cross-referenced environmental conditions, maintaining a detailed chronology of observable events. Interactions with villagers were similarly catalogued. Nathaniel observed adults and children in motion, stationary, or engaged in routine tasks, recording distances traversed, time spent in specific locations, and relative positioning within public and domestic spaces. Households were surveyed for layout, structural dimensions, and demographic composition, often cross-referenced with census data. Gate positioning, window placement, and pathway orientation were all noted. The consistency of these observations created an extensive procedural archive that encompassed both the physical and social architecture of Brimfield, forming a baseline of activity against which anomalies could later be compared. Nathaniel's attention extended to environmental phenomena. Frost accumulation, water pooling, soil conditions, and vegetation growth were systematically measured and mapped, noting the exact locations, dimensions, and progression over time. Observations were made in relation to permanent features: trees, fences and buildings, providing a spatially precise record. Every measurement, sketch, and written note adhered to standardized methods. Distances measured using pacing or rudimentary tools, angles recorded relative to established axes, and durations timed with available chronometers. This procedural consistency ensured that each entry could be verified and compared within the larger context of village life. The cumulative effect of Nathaniel's methodical observation was a steadily increasing density of recorded events. Whereas earlier documentation had focused on isolated incidents, the systematic cataloguing of both human and animal behavior, domestic arrangements, and environmental conditions provided a comprehensive framework for understanding recurring phenomena. Dr. Jonathan Pierce's review of these records confirmed the rigor and consistency of the work, noting that patterns were observable through sequential documentation alone. The subject's presence, while unobtrusive in appearance, exerted a subtle influence on the archival record. Every movement, displacement, and entire occurrence was noted, producing a dataset of rare precision for a subject of his age. Throughout this period, the village atmosphere remained marked by understated tension. Observers documented both the procedural routine of Nathaniel's work and the villagers' awareness of his constant surveillance. Yet all records retained a detached tone, focusing exclusively on measurable, observable phenomena. Distances, durations, angles, and positions were noted without conjecture. All environmental and demographic details were included, ensuring that future analysis could rely solely on the recorded facts. Continuity was maintained from prior anomalies. Previous irregular events were linked to Nathaniel's increasing cataloguing efforts, demonstrating an evolution from passive noticing to systematic observation. This chapter establishes the groundwork for later recordings of predictive phenomena, revealing a subject whose precise, methodical attention to detail extended across all aspects of village life. Observational records from the months following Nathaniel Crow's systematic cataloguing indicate the emergence of a discernible pattern in his anticipatory behaviors. Within the village of Brimfield, reports detail events where minor accidents, environmental changes, or alterations in the behavior of livestock coincided with Nathaniel's prior recorded predictions. On multiple occasions, he positioned himself in areas of the village where events later transpired, documenting the spatial coordinates, environmental conditions, and involved subjects. These records note not only the occurrences themselves, but also preparatory measurements, sketches, and sequential annotations of preceding variables. One incident, documented in detail, involved a branch of elm overhanging the north pathway near the home of Mrs. Abigail Crane. Observers recorded Nathaniel's placement on the southern edge of the road, approximately 4 meters from the overhang, noting wind direction at 12:45 p.m. on October 3, 1871, at a measured velocity of 4.2 meters per second. Approximately 5 minutes later, the branch fractured under accumulated moisture, falling within a calculated radius that narrowly missed the subject of Mrs. Crane's daughter, Mary, age 7. Nathaniel's prior sketches, annotated with the weight, approximate angle of the branch, and spatial proximity to pedestrian pathways, correspond precisely to the location of the incident. Witness accounts and subsequent measurements confirm the congruence of his recorded predictions with the actual occurrence, with no evidence of external interference. Parallel occurrences involved domestic animals and livestock under similar scrutiny. Chickens in the Whitmore backyard were noted to congregate near feeders at specific intervals. Deviations in feeding patterns were recorded alongside measurements of ambient temperature, soil moisture, and winds, direction. On several occasions, Nathaniel indicated in his records the precise time and location where individual animals would exhibit sudden cessation of movement, erratic locomotion, or falls. In one documented event on November 7, 1871, at 09:37 a.m., a hen collapsed near the east coop, following a period of recorded agitation. Nathaniel's notation, created 42 minutes prior, detailed the sequence of environmental conditions, distances between structural posts, and prior positioning of the animal, aligning with the observed outcome without variance beyond measurement error. These observations were consistently cross-referenced with environmental logs, including temperature readings, rainfall accumulation, and wind direction, establishing a pattern of precise procedural documentation. Human movement within the village also became subject to Nathaniel's methodical attention. Residents recorded instances in which he accurately anticipated locations of individuals within public and private spaces. At 11:12 a.m. on December 2nd, 1871, he positioned himself near the central well, noting the expected route of Mr. Josiah Abbott, a local miller. Nathaniel's sketches mapped both the miller's habitual pathway and surrounding obstacles. Observers confirmed that Mr. Abbott, upon retrieving water, followed the predicted route within 2 meters of Nathaniel's recorded line, encountering minor obstructions as documented. These instances were catalogued systematically, with precise attention to distance, duration, and environmental variables. No interpretive commentary was included in Nathaniel's notes. The entries remained strictly factual, detailing sequential movement and spatial relationships. Village Council minutes from November through December 1871 corroborate increasing attention to Nathaniel's records. Several villagers, while maintaining formal detachment, consulted him regarding predictable occurrences of falling objects, animal behaviors, or environmental hazards. Council documentation notes the provision of data points, weather conditions, time of day, placement of individuals and objects, and expected sequences of events. All responses were recorded with procedural exactitude. Predictions were logged in real time, and outcomes were cross-referenced against preceding entries. The frequency of successful anticipatory events, while not uniformly absolute, exceeded baseline probability, calculated from observed patterns alone, creating a growing archive of predictive accuracy. Environmental phenomena continued to intersect with Nathaniel's documented observations. Heavy rainfall, frost formation, and soil displacement were recorded in systematic charts, specifying location, duration, and precise measurements. Predictive notations included anticipated timing of runoff patterns, pooling water, or soil instability near structural boundaries. In one example, on November 21, 1871, at 08:45 a.m., Nathaniel indicated areas likely to experience surface erosion along the main thoroughfare. Measurements of precipitation over the preceding 48 hours, ambient temperature, and ground saturation were incorporated into the record. Subsequent inspection revealed erosion precisely in the noted locations, aligned with previously recorded distances and orientation of affected surfaces. The growing density of these observations reinforced the continuity between prior cataloging practices and emerging predictive capacity. Nathaniel's procedural rigor, timestamp notations, spatial mapping, environmental measurement, and sequential documentation produced a body of data wherein subsequent events could be anticipated with measurable accuracy. Dr. Jonathan Pierce, reviewing the archival logs, emphasized the objective nature of the documentation. All entries maintained a strictly factual tone, cataloging occurrences in relation to prior records, and refraining from speculation regarding causation, internal reasoning, or moral interpretation. The subjects of observation, both human and animal, were described in terms of measurable behavior, location, and outcome, maintaining the integrity of the archival record. On the morning of March 14, 1872, records indicate that Ruth Collins, aged 8, resident of Brimfield village, was noted absent from her household at 08:15 a.m. Her departure was first recorded by the Collins household staff during routine domestic inspection. The initial report, submitted to the village council at 08:30 a.m., documented her last known location near the eastern edge of Main Street, adjacent to the property of Mr. Josiah Abbott, with surrounding environmental conditions recorded as clear skies, temperature 2.3 degrees Celsius, wind velocity 3.6 meters per second from the northwest, and a light frost on ground surfaces. The Collins property map situates the exit point at coordinates 42.1462 degern, 72.08551 degWs, based on cadastral survey data of 1870. Following formal notification, the village council authorized a search party, comprising 12 adult male residents and 2 adult female participants, accompanied by Nathaniel Crow, aged 9, under the supervision of Reverend Elias Whitcomb. Council records specify that Nathaniel's role was observational, with explicit instructions to document terrain, environmental conditions, and movements of search participants. Notations in Reverend Whitcomb's diary detail Nathaniel's placement at grid coordinates 42.11465 DQ, 72.08534 DGW, approximately 30 meters from the Collins property line at 08:45 a.m., observing patterns of foot traffic, ground disturbances, and vegetation density. The search commenced along defined sectors, beginning with the northern perimeter of Brimfield Woods. Participants were instructed to traverse in parallel lines at intervals of 5 meters, maintaining visual contact with adjoining searchers. Nathaniel's recorded positions were systematically catalogued, including timing, azimuth measurements, and distance traveled. By 09:12 a.m., he had progressed to the southeast quadrant of the woodland, noting elevation changes of 3.4 meters over a 40-meter span, soil moisture readings, and underbrush density. His notebook entries included sketches of tree placements, fallen branches, and potential concealment zones. These sketches incorporated linear scaling of 150, distances to nearest landmarks, and orientation relative to village centre. At 09:45 a.m., council documentation indicates that Nathaniel identified a deviation in typical woodland animal paths, tracks of squirrels and ground birds, aligned with the location of disturbed leaf litter. He marked this observation on a map overlaying the previously recorded terrain. Participants, following his guidance, adjusted search lines to incorporate the identified area. Observations from the search log note that Nathaniel maintained a straight trajectory through the designated sector, placing one hand lightly on tree trunks at measured intervals of 2.1 meters, noting bark condition, moss growth, and potential concealment zones for a small subject. No interpretive commentary regarding strategy or intent was included in his records. All entries remained factual and spatially oriented. By 10:18 a.m., environmental readings indicate a mild increase in temperature to 3.1 degrees, with wind direction shifting to 340 degrees northwest and minor precipitation in the form of light snowflakes, recorded with calibrated anemometer and thermometer readings. Nathaniel's annotations include the effect of these conditions on visibility, leaf coverage, and ground stability. At 10:25 a.m., he approached a natural depression in the terrain, coordinates 42.1471 degree, 72.08447 degree, noting a minor stream of water flowing through the depression at a depth of 6 centimeters. Nathaniel recorded the trajectory of the stream and the approximate distance to nearest tree clusters. Within 3 minutes, search participants reported a small voice emitting from within the depression. Nathaniel's PR. IR measurements of distance from tree cluster to watercourse correspond precisely to the location of the subject when located. Ruth Collins was recovered at 10:28 a.m., situated within a natural depression, measuring 1.2 meters in diameter and 0.6 meters in depth. Observers recorded her position relative to immediate landmarks, including 3 mature oaks and a fallen log, 1.5 meters to the north. Her physical condition was noted as unharmed, with no observable abrasions or injuries. Environmental readings at the point of recovery were documented. Ambient temperature 3.2 degrees, ground surface temperature 1.9 degrees, and relative humidity 64%. The position of leaf litter, minor twigs, and accumulated snow corresponded with Nathaniel's earlier recorded observations of terrain disturbances. Subsequent entries in Reverend Whitcomb's ledger indicate that Nathaniel systematically documented the sequence of retrieval, precise approach path of each search participant, the alignment of bodies relative to recovered subject, and distances between individual participants. Observations included measurements of spatial orientation, angles of view, and timing to nearest minute. The recovered subject's responses, statements regarding her location and movement within the depression, were recorded in verbatim form by council clerks, with cross-references to environmental conditions and prior terrain annotations. Nathaniel's role in guiding participants is catalogued factually. He indicated positions, measured distances, and drew maps without providing evaluative commentary. Official documentation submitted to the Brimfield Council emphasized continuity with prior cataloguing procedures. Nathaniel's observational methods, as previously recorded in his notebooks, were utilized in a formal capacity to guide the procedural search. The village physician, Dr. Jonathan Pierce, annotated the recovery log with references to Nathaniel's measurements, verifying the consistency between pre-recorded environmental data and subsequent outcomes. Records include sequential numbering of all documented positions, time-stamped annotations, and cross-referenced grid coordinates to ensure archival accuracy. Additional environmental factors noted during the recovery included minor soil displacement, leaf coverage patterns, and the impact of human movement on flora and ground conditions. Nathaniel's entries document the relationship between terrain features and subject concealment, noting distances from prominent markers, angles of obstructions, and elevations. Council minutes note that while Nathaniel's observations were utilized to optimize search efficiency, his actions were recorded with complete procedural neutrality, emphasizing factual contribution rather than speculative insight. Following the recovery, Dr. Pierce initiated formalized observation procedures aimed at systematic study. Records indicate that subsequent to this incident, Nathaniel's cataloging expanded to include precise mapping of environmental variables, measurement of human and animal interactions, and longitudinal tracking of patterns observed during search exercises. The archival record establishes continuity between Nathaniel's previous cataloging practices, predictive observations, and practical application in structured environmental tasks. The procedural documentation surrounding Ruth Collins's disappearance concludes with verification of coordinates, timing of recovery, environmental conditions, and participant placement. All entries maintain strict adherence to neutral tone and factual reporting, ensuring that the record can serve as a reference for subsequent studies of observational accuracy, environmental interaction, and village procedural compliance. The cumulative record emphasizes sequence, measurement, and verifiable outcomes, preserving the objectivity of archival practice while demonstrating the application of Nath's Nathaniel's methodical observation skills to critical real-world scenarios. On the afternoon of May 3, 1872, during routine inspection of the Crow household, a previously unobserved compartment within a writing desk in the study of Reverend Elias Whitcomb was noted by household staff. The compartment measured 32 centimeters in width, 21 centimeters in depth, and 12 centimeters in height, constructed of oak panels consistent with furniture carpentry of the 1870 period. Within this compartment were 3 bound volumes, described in inventory as small notebooks, each measuring 14.2 by 9.6 centimeters, with covers of dark brown calfskin leather exhibiting light scuffing consistent with handling over multiple weeks. The first volume, designated Volume 1, contained entries commencing January 17, 1872, and extending through March 29, 1872. Subsequent volumes contained chronological continuation of entries through April 28, 1872. The notebooks were composed of lined paper, 80 pages per volume, with ink predominantly of a black-brown hue, consistent with iron gall formulations of the period. Entries were made in a fine, legible hand with consistent slant and spacing, accompanied by pencil sketches on adjacent pages. Ink density and writing pressure were uniform, suggesting controlled, deliberate execution. The pages were preserved with minimal deterioration. Occasional smudges were present, attributed to routine handling rather than environmental exposure. Each page was numbered sequentially in the upper right corner, and time-stamped entries were located at the top left, indicating hour and minute of observation. Volume 1 begins with entries documenting environmental conditions surrounding the Crow residence and immediate periphery. On January 17, 1872, at 07:45 a.m., Nathaniel Crow's first observation was recorded near the east yard boundary, documenting snow depth of 4 centimeters, ambient temperature 1.2 degrees C, wind velocity 2.1 meters per second fro, northwest, and positional references to fence lines and outbuildings. Subsequent entries included precise sketches of animal pathways, noting hoof prints, claw impressions, and flight patterns of birds observed within a radius of 50 meters. Measurements were made using a folding ruler calibrated to the imperial system, with each path distance annotated to the nearest 0.5 meter. The journals exhibit systematic categorization of behaviors. Animals, including domestic chickens, a single goat, and a neighboring dog, were observed under varying environmental conditions. Entry dated February 2nd, 1872, records a sequence in which a chicken was removed from its enclosure at 09:30 a.m., allowed to traverse a marked quadrant measuring 4 meters by 4 meters. Nathaniel documented the trajectory, reactions to auditory stimuli, and proximity to other animals or inanimate objects. Sketches were annotated with directional arrows, numbered steps, and reference points aligned to fixed environmental markers. Observations were strictly descriptive, including position of wings, orientation of head, and movement of legs, with no interpretive notes. Volume 2 contains detailed recordings of human activity within the village. On March 1st, 1872, at 08:12 a.m., Nathaniel observed Mrs. Abigail Harmon walking along Main Street, recording exact start and end points of movement along the 120-meter stretch between the Harmon household and the Brimfield General Store. Notations included precise stride counts, pauses, and positional shifts relative to nearby obstructions, such as fence posts or piles of firewood. In adjacent sketches, measured angles of foot placement were noted using protractor markings, alongside linear measurements of visual landmarks. Weather conditions were catalogued in parallel. Temperature, wind direction, barometric pressure, and cloud cover were consistently recorded. Across all volumes, sequences of events were noted for patterns of causality and correlation. Entry of March 7, 1872, documents a minor accident involving the goat entangled in a garden trellis. Nathaniel's annotation includes spatial coordinates, measurements of trellis height and width, sequence of animal movement, and position of human intervention. Each element was logged chronologically, with cross-reference to prior entries documenting similar incidents. Sketches display top-down and side perspectives, with grid overlays measuring 1 centimeter per meter of terrain to ensure scale accuracy. The notebooks also reveal methodology for repeatable experiments. Volume 3 contains a series of entries from April 12 through April 27, 1872, in which Nathaniel systematically manipulated environmental variables, placement of objects within yards, exposure of pathways to sunlight or shadow, and timing of human or animal passage. Measurements were consistently taken using standardized tools, folding rulers, compasses for angular determination, pocket chronometers for time intervals, and small thermometers calibrated to Fahrenheit. Each entry documents start and end times, distances, and environmental conditions, with sketches detailing positions of all relevant elements within a measured grid. Additional observations include physiological reactions of animals, recorded without interpretation. For instance, on April 16, 1872, Nathaniel noted orientation of goat ears, pupil dilation in chickens, and subtle shifts in balance, recording these as numeric sequences corresponding to observed intervals. Human behaviors were similarly annotated. Hand positions, gait alterations, and pauses were marked with timestamps accurate to the minute. Each observation was linked via numbered sequences to prior entries, demonstrating an emerging system of cross-referencing that allowed identification of recurring patterns without any speculative commentary. The physical characteristics of the journals further illustrate systematic care. Margins were consistently maintained at 2 centimeters. Annotations in pencil were confined to margins and lightly erased in subsequent entries if superseded by updated measurements. Sketching employed pencil, ink, and occasionally charcoal for shading, with scale bars noted on each illustration. Page corners were reinforced with thin vellum strips, ensuring preservation despite repeated handling. The arrangement of observations suggests intentional compartmentalization. Environmental measurements, animal behavior, and human activity were separated yet linked via coded numeric sequences for easy retrieval. Discovery of the journals prompted Dr. Jonathan Pierce to examine entries systematically. In his observational notes dated May 4, 1872, Pierce documented the precision of Nathaniel's recording methods, noting that repeated measurements aligned within a margin of error of 1 to 2%. He catalogued the cross-referencing system, highlighting the capacity for longitudinal tracking of both environmental and social phenomena. The archival integrity of these documents was maintained. All observations were recorded without emotive commentary, speculation, or moral evaluation. The records constitute a continuous chronological account of systematic monitoring, consistent with previous observational patterns established in the village. Subsequent entries demonstrate the increasing density and refinement of documentation. By late April, Nathaniel's records include overlapping grids, multiple observational dimensions, and cross-indexing between animal behavior and human movement. Pages reflect a consistent methodology. Environmental conditions noted at top of page, followed by sequential observations, time-stamped events, and sketches ALNet. To standardized grid coordinates. Throughout the months of May and June 1872, the village of Brimfield documented a series of incidents that, while individually unremarkable, exhibited recurring temporal and spatial correlations. Observations were systematically recorded by Dr. Jonathan Pierce, who maintained daily logs detailing locations, environmental conditions, and affected parties. Concurrently, Nathaniel Crow's routine movements through the village were mapped with precision, including departure and return times to the Whitcomb residence, traversal of streets and pathways, and proximity to livestock enclosures, wells, and outbuildings. On May 12, 1872, at 09:43 a.m., 3 chickens were found deceased near the southern perimeter of the Crow property. Measurement of positions indicated spacing of approximately 2.4 meters between each subject. Environmental records noted a temperature of 15.2 degrees, overcast skies, humidity at 68%, and light southeast wind at 1.7 meters per second. Nathaniel was observed exiting the property at 09:12 a.m. and returning at 09:51 a.m. No human interference was recorded, and prior activities in the yard were catalogued as routine feeding and maintenance. Subsequent incidents in late May included minor injuries among children traversing Main Street. On May 18th at 03:14 p.m., a child tripped on an uneven plank near the Brimfield General Store, sustaining a minor abrasion to the forearm. Nathaniel had passed the same location at 02:58 p.m., moving along the opposite sidewalk, maintaining measured strides of approximately 0.55 meters per pace. Local merchants noted the structural plank's slight displacement in prior daily inspections. Observations were logged without attribution of causality. Only precise coordinates, time, and spatial relationships were recorded. Structural anomalies were similarly catalogued. On June 2, 1872, a segment of fencing bordering the Crow property C elapsed, affecting an area measuring 1.9 meters in length and 0.95 meters in height. Timber density was measured at 650 kilograms per cubic meter, consistent with oak construction standards of the period. Nathaniel's location was recorded as 15 meters north of the collapsed section at 10:07 a.m., returning to the West Garden at 10:24 a.m. Environmental conditions included wind velocity at 2.3 meters per second from the northwest, ambient temperature 18.1 degrees C, and barometric pressure 1014 millibars. Similar collapses had been documented in April, with distances, dimensions, and conditions cross-referenced. Observational cross-referencing revealed increasing density of correlated events. By June 10, 1872, Dr. Pierce's log contained tabulated sequences of incidents, with incidents numbered, coordinates recorded, environmental factors enumerated, and chronological proximity to Nathaniel's documented location noted. Livestock fatalities, structural anomalies, and minor personal injuries were quantified and sorted for temporal clustering. Tabular records indicate that of 21 incidents catalogued between May 1st and June 10th, 15 occurred within 30 meters of Nathaniel's location within 45-minute windows, though no direct interaction was observed. Village schedules and agricultural cycles were included in correlation analysis. Daily routines such as milking times, crop watering, and livestock feeding were mapped against incident occurrences. On May 25, 1872, 3 chickens were found deceased in a pen scheduled for feeding at 06:30 a.m. Nathaniel was documented traversing the property at 06:17 a.m. and departing to the north path at 06:44 a.m. Weather conditions included 2 centimeters of rainfall overnight, 12.5 degrees ambient temperature, and 70% humidity. Notation emphasized exact timing of each event, positional coordinates of Nathaniel and affected subjects, and recorded environmenta. Parameters. Human movement was similarly catalogued. On June 5, 1872, 2 children collided near the intersection of Main and Elm Streets at 02:41 p.m. Nathaniel's prior movement through the area at 02:29 p.m. was logged, including stride length, pace, and trajectory through the intersection. Distance between collision site and Nathaniel's last recorded location measured 12.6 meters. Weather records included light south wind at 1.5 meters per second, ambient temperature 19.3 degrees, and clear skies. No eyewitness accounts suggested direct involvement. Documentation focused on measurable sequences and potential temporal correlation. Recurrent patterns were noted with livestock behavior. A series of 7 chicken fatalities recorded between May 12th and June 9th exhibited consistent distribution. Deaths occurred within 3 meters of perimeters, in early morning or late afternoon periods, with proximity to environmental stimuli such as sunlight angles, wind shifts, or minor disturbances of feed placement. Nathaniel's proximity was systematically recorded, noting his position to the nearest meter, duration within range, and movement pattern relative to pen boundaries. Cross-referencing of structural incidents demonstrated similar sequences. Fence collapses, minor barn door misalignments, and displacement of garden trellises were logged with measurements, material specifications, and environmental conditions. Correlations were noted between these anomalies and Nathaniel's traversals through adjacent spaces with tabulated data including distance, duration, and timing. Each entry was catalogued without commentary on intent, morality, or emotional impact. Village population demographics were included in analysis. Census records from April 1872 provided names, ages, occupations, and household locations for all Brimfield residents. These records were incorporated into cross-referencing, mapping human prees, sensing and establishing baseline movement patterns. Observed anomalies were compared against these baselines for frequency and proximity. Minor injuries, collisions, or household accidents were plotted against spatial distribution of villagers, revealing clustering around Nathaniel's recorded presence without assertion of causality. Dr. Pierce maintained meticulous observation logs, systematically recording Nathaniel's daily routines, measured environmental conditions, and temporal sequences of anomalies. By mid-June, logs included over 150 cross-referenced events, environmental measurements, and precise positional mapping. Statistical counts indicated repeated coincidences within measurable tolerances, but documentation preserved detachment. All events, distances, timings, and conditions were reported neutrally, with no speculation regarding cognitive awareness or moral framework. By June 28, 1872, the accumulation of cross-referenced events suggested the emergence of discernible patterns. Livestock deaths, minor injuries, and structural anomalies were increasingly observed within proximity of Nathaniel's recorded location, yet documentation remained purely factual. Observed patterns were catalogued in tabular form, with serial numbering, spatial coordinates, environmental conditions, and duration of Nathaniel's presence included for each entry. All sketches, diagrams, and notes adhered to prior conventions. Scale grids, directional arrows, and annotated distances were consistent across all incidents. On July 3, 1872, Dr. Jonathan Pierce convened a formal meeting at the Brimfield Rectory to address observations regarding Nathaniel Crow's activities, following the accumulation of incidents catalogued in prior months. Present were Dr. Pierce, Reverend Elias Whitcomb, and by prior invitation, Town Clerk Samuel Harding, whose records of village events were to be cross-referenced. The meeting commenced at 09:12 a.m., with procedural notes indicating all participants were seated at a mahogany table measuring 2.3 meters in length and 0.85 meters in width. Ambient conditions recorded included temperature of 21.4 degrees, clear skies, humidity at 62%, and light northwesterly wind at 1.9 meters per second, verified by weather observations from the Brimfield meteorological log. Dr. Pierce began the session with a recitation of documented incidents between May 12 and June 28, 1872. He referenced his own logs, including tabulated sequences of livestock fatalities, structural anomalies, and minor injuries, noting temporal and spatial correlations with Nathaniel Crow's documented presence. Entries cited include Incident Number 21, June 10, 1872, 10:07 a.m., Fence collapse, north garden boundary, Crow observed 15 meters north, and Incident Number 17, June 5, 1872, 02:29 p.m. Pedestrian collision, Main and Elm intersection, Crow passed area 12.6 meters prior. These citations were read aloud verbatim, with logbooks open to the corresponding pages and diagrams displayed for review. Reverend Whitcomb confirmed Nathaniel's documented routines, including morning traversal of the central street, midday observations at the churchyard, and evening return to the Whitcomb residence. Whitcomb's entries, maintained in a separate ledger, included positional coordinates measured with calibrated measuring tape, stride counts, and temporal intervals between locations. Statements were recorded verbatim in official minutes. Crow observed entering West Alley at 05:14 p.m., departure noted at 05:31 p.m., no human interaction observed in interval. Dr. Pierce queried Nathaniel regarding the methodology of his observations. Nathaniel was instructed to demonstrate with precise measures the manner in which he recorded environmental phenomena. He presented a notebook bound in dark leather, 23 by 15 centimeters, containing ruled pages with meticulous diagrams, sketches of animal behavior, spatial measurements, and time-stamped entries. Diagrams included proportional scales, annotations of distances in meters, and arrows indicating directional movement. Nathaniel executed measurements of the room and table, recording results with pen and ink, each entry dated July 3, 1872, 09:36 a.m., demonstrating exactitude consistent with prior documentation. Dr. Pierce inquired specifically about prior incidents of livestock fatalities. Nathaniel referenced entries within the journal, reading from page 42. May 18, 1872, 09:43 a.m. 3 Gallus domesticus found deceased, spacing 2.4 meters apart. Environmental parameters noted: temperature 15.2 degrees, wind 1.7 km/s SE, overcast. Nathaniel clarified that entries were compiled systematically, adhering to observable data without inference. Dr. Pierce recorded verbatim the notation. Crow emphasizes cataloging observed phenomena without assigning causality. Methodical record maintained for each subject and event. Subsequent discussion addressed minor accidents in the village. Nathaniel was directed to demonstrate cataloging procedures for pedestrian incidents. At 10:12 a.m., he measured distances between points of contact for 2 children who had collided on Main Street, employing pre-marked floor tiles as reference points. Measurements recorded included collision site coordinates, approx. 12.6 meters from Nathaniel's prior location, stride counts, and time elapsed between traversal and incident. Dr. Pierce transcribed all figures into official minutes, maintaining neutral language. Positions, distances, and timings noted without commentary on internal cognition or motive. Reverend Whitcomb contributed additional documentation, verifying Nathaniel's procedural detachment. Entries included: Crow observed events without verbal interruption, gestures limited to pointing and measurement, no intervention in incident resolution. These statements were incorporated verbatim into Dr. Pierce's minutes, dated July 3, 1872, 11:04 a.m. Notation emphasized compliance with archival standards. All observations recorded chronologically, referencing physical parameters, environmental factors, and precise spatial temporal mapping. Discussion extended to structural anomalies, including fence collapses and door misalignments previously recorded. Nathaniel demonstrated the method by which he catalogued prior conditions, including measurements of timber density, 650 kilograms for oak posts, dimensions of affected panels, and environmental parameters at the time of observation. Dr. Pierce verified that entries from May and June 1872 were consistent with Nathaniel's described methodology, noting alignment with observed event sequences and measured outcomes. During review, Dr. Pierce requested Nathaniel to clarify the distinction between observation and intervention. Nathaniel executed a sequence of measurements, indicating the absence of interaction. Distances recorded in meters, temporal intervals logged in minutes, environmental conditions catalogued, no human or animal behavior altered by presence. This entry was transcribed into official records at 11:37 a.m. Dr. Pierce annotated margins to emphasize neutrality and detachment, confirming compliance with procedural standards for archival documentation. Minutes of the meeting also included formal acknowledgement of limitations in contemporary scientific methodology. Dr. Pierce noted in entries, "Current understanding insufficient to assign causality, only quantifiable data recorded, methodological rigor maintained." Observations were logged across multiple pages with references to prior incidents, linking the formal documentation to existing chronological records from May through June. The session concluded at 12:18 p.m. Official minutes catalogued departure times. Nathaniel left rectory at 12:21 p.m., Reverend Whitcomb at 12:25 p.m., and Dr. Pierce remained to finalize log entries. Weather conditions at conclusion: 23.1 degrees C, light northwesterly wind, 2.1 cloudless sky. All entries were numbered sequentially, cross-referenced to previous logs, and signed by Dr. Pierce for archival verification. Between August 1st and September 12, 1872, multiple entries in Dr. Jonathan Pierce's observational ledger and the Brimfield town records document an accumulation of minor but significant anomalies coinciding with Nathaniel Crow's routines. On August 3rd, 1872, at 08:47 a.m., 3 members of the Miller family were observed in the northern courtyard of their residence, approximately 14 meters west of Crow's habitual path, when a wooden gate hinge failed, causing a section of fencing to collapse. Measurements recorded post-incident included gate dimensions, 1.8 meters high, 0.9 meters wide, material density, pine timber, 420 kg/km, and distance from Crow's position, estimated 13.6 meters. The incident was catalogued sequentially as event number 58 in Pierce's log, with cross-reference to similar collapses on July 27th and August 1st, demonstrating spatial and temporal clustering without implied causality. On August 10th, 1872, at 02:33 p.m., a minor injury occurred involving Mr. Thomas Whitaker, who sustained a superficial laceration to the right forearm while handling a livestock enclosure at the East Meadow, 21 meters from Nathaniel's recorded location at the time. Environmental conditions included temperature 25.2 degrees C, humidity 58%, light southerly wind 1.4 bms. Measurements of the enclosure indicated a partially rotted crossbeam, 0.12 meters diameter, pine, providing a factual description of the cause of injury. Nathaniel's presence was logged 6.2 meters from the site prior to the incident, with no recorded physical interaction with the subject or enclosure. Subsequent entries document social responses within the village. On August 15, 1872, a council record noted a meeting convened by Town Clerk Samuel Harding, attended by 11 residents, including 2 school teachers and 3 farmers, to discuss recent sequences of anomalies. Recorded minutes detail observations of Nathaniel's consistent presence near sites of minor accidents, behavioral routines, and consultation by local children seeking guidance with everyday tasks. Official language in minutes. Crow observed traversing village paths, consultation sought by inhabitants on agricultural and domestic matters, physical interactions limited to directional indication, timing and distances noted. Observational density increased in late August. On August 23, 1872, at 10:19 a.m., 3 village chickens were found deceased in the eastern orchard, each spaced 2.1 meters apart. Temperature 23.8 degrees, wind calm, cloud coverage 70%. Nathaniel's location was recorded at 11 meters distance during the discovery. Entries in Dr. Pierce's ledger cross-referenced prior occurrences on July 12th, August 3rd, and August 15th, maintaining sequence integrity and chronological continuity. Detailed annotations included exact positioning relative to the central well, footpath coordinates, and environmental conditions. By early September, reports indicated a mixed perception among villagers. On September 2, 1872, observations of public interactions at the central marketplace recorded 8 separate consultations between Nathaniel and adult residents. Data noted included participant count, precise positioning, measured in meters relative to central fountain, duration of each consultation, average 6 minutes, range 4 to 9 minutes, and environmental parameters, temperature 22.9 degrees Celsius, humidity 61%, wind 0.8 miles nbws. Official notes emphasized neutrality. Crow provided guidance on routine matters, no force applied, distances measured and timed, interactions documented sequentially. Several incidents drew indirect attention to Nathaniel's duality of presence and detachment. On September 5, 1872, at 03:47 p.m., a minor structural collapse occurred at the rear stable of Mr. Henderson's property, distance 19.2 meters from Nathaniel's recorded path. Measurements included wall dimensions, 2.4 meters high, 1.6 meters width, construction materials, oak beams, 660 kilograms meticulous, and time interval between Nathaniel's passage and incident, 8 minutes. Log entries recorded the exact position of Nathaniel upon arrival for observational purposes, noting methodical cataloging of environmental variables, light conditions, wind velocity, and humidity. Public records indicate that by mid-September, Nathaniel's assistance was solicited in at least 7 additional documented events, including livestock herding guidance, retrieval of minor lost items, and directional instruction for children navigating the village. Chronological entries record distances between Nathaniel and subjects, average 10.3 meters, times of consultation, ranging 07:15 to 06:40 p.m., and environmental readings, temperature 20.6 to 25.2 degrees Celsius, wind 0 to 2.1 dBs. Villager responses were logged factually, compliance, verbal acknowledgement, or observational attention, without commentary on emotional disposition. On September 12, 1872, Dr. Pierce completed a cross-reference summary of 27 documented anomalies, detailing correlations with Nathaniel's routine traversal of village thoroughfares. Locations, times, participants, and environmental factors were systematically tabulated, e.g., event number 74, collapsed fence, Main Street, 09:18 a.m., crow distance 12.4 meters, temperature 21.3 degrees, wind 1.1 ms SW, witnesses 3 adults, 1 child. Analysis of sequences preserved neutrality, emphasizing only measurable outcomes and precise positioning. Throughout the period, Nathaniel maintained a consistent pattern of systematic observation, recording environmental variables and human interactions in notebooks previously noted for meticulous sketches and time-stamped entries. Each observation session included measurement of distances to points of interest, sequential notation of animal and human movement, and environmental recording, temperature, wind, and light conditions. Logs were consistently cross-referenced with prior events, producing a dense, verifiable dataset. The cumulative record between August and September 1872 demonstrates both the density of Nathaniel's presence and the procedural documentation of village life. Official entries consistently emphasize methodology, including calibration of measuring instruments, verification of positional data, and neutral language describing actions and sequences. Patterns in recorded events were noted, but no inference regarding causality, intent, or emotional content was included. Following the conclusion of field observations in Brimfield, Massachusetts, the records maintained by Dr. Jonathan Pierce and associated village documentation underwent systematic archival processes beginning in November 1872. All observational ledgers, notebooks, sketches, and official reports related to Nathaniel Crow were catalogued under reference code BC 1872 OBS by the Brimfield Municipal Archives. The cataloguing procedure included physical inventory of each item, verification of completeness, cross-referencing of time-stamped entries, and detailed notation of material conditions, including paper quality, ink composition, and binding integrity. Each ledger page was examined, and entries were logged sequentially into the municipal registry, recording dimensions: ledger height 31 centimeters, width 20 centimeters, thickness 2.3 centimeters, number of pages, average 112 per volume, and date ranges of content, March 1871 to October 1872. In December 1872, the village clerk, under supervision of Reverend Elias Whitcomb, initiated the transfer of primary observational ledgers to the Massachusetts Historical Society, ensuring environmental conditions were maintained to preserve ink fidelity and paper stability. Transport documentation included temperature and humidity records, packaging methodology, and handling personnel signatures. Dr. Pierce appended a detailed inventory, noting the specific incidents associated with each ledger, including livestock behavior, minor structural collapses, environmental readings, and human interactions, all cross-referenced by date, time, and location. Entries explicitly avoided interpretative commentary, maintaining the neutral archival tone employed throughout the original observations. Throughout 1873, a secondary set of copies was produced for institutional research purposes. The reproduction process involved hand-copying of written entries into bound volume, as with pagination and indexing identical to the originals, ensuring continuity of reference. Each copied page was verified against the original for accuracy, including all sketches, measurement annotations, and temporal notations. This ensured that the procedural documentation of Nathaniel Crow's presence and activities could be studied without risk of handling degradation to primary sources. Storage conditions were standardized: temperature 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, humidity 50 to 55%, light exposure minimized to prevent ink fading, and volumes stored in locked wooden cabinets with labeled compartments corresponding to incident type and chronological order. Cross-referenced archival notes highlight the cumulative density of recorded anomalies across the village between 1871 and 1872. Incident tables were prepared listing event number, date, exact time, precise location, environmental conditions, observed behaviors of humans and animals, distances measured, and any responses documented. For example, event number 74, August 12, 1872, included a structural collapse of a stable wall, location coordinates 42 DG 06 34 Faus N, 72 DG 8 12 WW, environmental variables recorded, temperature 21.3 degrees, wind 1.1 mths SW, cloud cover 60%, and presence of Nathaniel Crow measured 12.4 meters from the site. Similar meticulous tables were constructed for all 132 documented anomalies, preserving continuity and accuracy without subjective interpretation. By mid-1873, Dr. Pierce's personal correspondence with academic contacts in Boston and Cambridge facilitated partial duplication of the records for scientific observation. Letters, formally dated and numbered, included precise descriptions of each volume, indexing methodology, and guidance for systematic review. These communications emphasized factual details, exact page numbers, time-stamped events, cross-references between sketches and written observations, and preservation status of all original materials. Copies were intended for study under strict supervision to maintain the integrity of the primary data and to ensure neutral archival conditions. The archives also preserved ancillary materials, including Reverend Whitcomb's reports on village responses, official town council minutes recording public awareness of Nathaniel Crow's presence, and census records documenting household members, ages, and occupations of those interacting with him. Each record was cross-indexed with observational ledgers, maintaining precise chronological alignment and environmental context. Any discrepancies between sources were noted and annotated, including page references and supplemental remarks, preserving the accuracy of the archival record. Subsequent institutional inspections in 1881 and 1892 confirmed the physical integrity and completeness of the records. Reports detail measurements of binding wear, ink stability, and page preservation, ensuring that all observational data remained accessible and unaltered. Verification processes included sample audits of time-stamped entries, cross-referencing environmental conditions, and comparison of sketches with reported locations of animals, structures, and human interactions. Each audit concluded with factual notation of findings without extrapolation or interpretive commentary. By the early 20th century, the Crow-Pierce collection had been fully catalogued into a permanent repository within the Massachusetts Historical Society, occupying shelf designations BC 1972 OBS-A through H. An accompanying index was created to facilitate retrieval of specific events, environmental data, or sketches. Index entries included event number, date, environmental parameters, participants, precise locations, and cross-references to corresponding field sketches or secondary copies. Accessibility protocols included supervised handling, with researchers required to document viewing dates, specific volumes consulted, and any reproductions made, preserving both the archival integrity and procedural rigor. All records retained methodological consistency with the original observational approach. Notebooks and ledgers provided sequentially numbered entries, sketches, measurements, and environmental annotations. Official correspondence and town records confirmed that Nathaniel Crow's documented presence correlated with extensive procedural observation by Dr. Pierce and municipal authorities. The cumulative dataset demonstrated systematic cataloging, density of recorded anomalies, and strict adherence to chronological and spatial precision, without interpretation of intent, emotion, or causality. Overall, the archival preservation process ensured that the entirety of Nathaniel Crow's observational record remained intact, accessible, and verifiable. All materials were catalogued, cross-referenced, and stored under controlled conditions, enabling historical, scientific, and methodological study. Continuity with prior chapters is maintained through meticulous indexing, recording of event sequences, environmental conditions, and participant data. The collection's integrity and completeness provide a verifiable historical record of an extraordinary phenomenon, preserved within institutional repositories for future reference. Nathaniel Crow's story reminds us that history often contains mysteries science struggles to explain. A boy who observed, calculated, and catalogued the world around him, leaving a village both awed and unsettled. If you found this journey into the silent observer's life as chilling and fascinating as we did, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Forgotten Chronicles. Hit the bell to uncover more hidden tales from the past where every record, every ledger, and every forgotten detail tells a story the world almost forgot.